Hello, this is Aware on the Air for July 3rd, 2012. Aware is the anti-war, anti-racism effort, and tonight we're coming to you without our usual anchor. I'm sitting in his place, and we're going to have some statements for you that I hope you will think over and consider. So we will be in the parade tomorrow, the 4th of July. Locally, Champaign-Urbana has a parade every year starting at 1 o'clock tomorrow, and the route has been well publicized, and we will be walking in it, carrying some signs, including the one that you see behind me, saying that for everyone's children, a world without war. And I hope you will look for us there. We'll be with some other groups that are generally in sympathy with our aims, and we with theirs. And it is clear, however, that locally Aware is a completely independent group with no national affiliations of any kind. Today's theme is Say the Magic Word, and I'm going to propose as the magic word of late is war. I've commented on this before. Everything, it seems, is a war. There's a war on women, according to some, or a war on this or that, a war on the dollar.
Christmas.
Yeah, war on Christmas. What else has been a war
Drugs.
on recently? And
War on poverty.
this is becoming, I think, an easy word, short, punchy word to reach for and try to mobilize people for or against something. And I think it's losing its meaning. The one I want to come back to is the word, much in the news today, people are disputing about whether it's a tax or not a tax. So is tax the magic word of the day? I don't know. There are a number of others that I find more and more questionable, but are on everyone's lips these days. Win or lose? Was this a win for Obama, or did he really lose? Was it a victory or a defeat? And are we still number one, and so on? So we seem to be hung up on this kind of win-lose rhetoric. So I'm joined by my friends here, and on my left, Karen Medina, on my right, Stuart Levy, and on his right, David Harley. And are you winners or losers?
We shall see.
Yeah, we'll see. Right. So. Okay, I will ask Stuart, do you want to start off and tell us about what's on your mind?
Okay, there have been a couple of recent articles about Syria that seem important to pay attention to. With all the hype really in the media about atrocities committed by the Assad's government in Syria against the people, there's a very real push for some sort of military intervention, as we did in Libya, which was nominally on humanitarian grounds, but it turned into intervening in a civil war. So fairness and accuracy in reporting, fair.org recently did a piece looking in more detail at the massacre in Hula, where many there's a famous photograph of many civilians, young people with their throats cut, and pointing out that although that had been blamed, and the media stories we were hearing were almost universally saying this is, these were people on the side of the regime doing it. There's good evidence to think that it was actually committed by the opposition. If there are atrocities being committed on both sides, the story is not nearly as clear. And now, which doesn't mean that the Assad regime is not in the wrong, but it's a very different situation if there's if there are gross brutalities being committed by a regime against defenseless people than if there is an ongoing civil war in which the West is being urged to participate on one side. So now Russ Baker has this piece called How the Corporate Media is Snookering You on Syria. He writes, "For those versed in the black arts of propaganda, the hijacking of Arab Spring must be a beauteous thing to behold. First came evidently spontaneous uprisings in Tunisia and Egypt. Then some up-and-comer in Washington or London or Paris had a brainstorm, a new twist on a very old idea. If you can't beat them, join them. Or even better, co-opt them and use them for your own purposes. The old way of getting rid of inconvenient leaders was very 20th century. In the case of Saddam Hussein, it was a monstrous lie, followed by massive bloodletting on both sides. Tahrir Square suggested how to bring down a regime in a manner far less costly and far more palatable to the public, with lots of medium-sized and little lies, war through Twitter, war through expendable proxies, provide financial incentives to key figures to publicly renounce the old leadership, generate a steady stream of heart-rending moments and photos and allegations, generate endless human rights violations, in quotes, by baiting the government into a military response, and then very publicly petition international bodies for redress of humanitarian concerns." We were hearing more about that just today, as now the International Criminal Court, there's a call on them to get involved. So, back to Russell Baker. Muammar Gaddafi, a fiercely independent, quasi-socialistic African transnationalist, was the guinea pig. A brilliant disinformation campaign isolated him, authentic domestic grievances were encouraged, and a whole war was conducted on behalf of the West with no Western soldier putting a boot on the ground. Next up is Syria's Bashar al-Assad. So began again the covert arming of real domestic opponents and an extensive and variegated propaganda campaign. As with Libya, Western countries were covertly overthrowing a Middle East regime, just as they have done over the decades. And as before, the media said not a word about what was really going on. So the public did not really understand, and there is practically no debate at all. Thanks to the internet, we have what appears to be a more diverse range of media offerings than ever before. We know the corporate-owned American media won't take any sort of risks to warn us about what is going on. We're lucky to have alternatives. We have easy access to high-quality foreign media, the BBC, The Guardian, Al Jazeera, and the like. And we have a plethora of alternative media, from left to right to other. With this cornucopia of competing entities, we have every reason to expect that we'll get good, hard-hitting, tough-minded reporting and analysis. Right? Wrong. Almost no news organization of any note, of any kind, has called Libya and Syria for what they really are. The reasons may be various, but perhaps the most decisive one is this. All have seemingly fallen victim to a superb propaganda strategy that associates critical reporting and critical thinking on Syria with defending its regime. That is, of course, dictatorial and brutal against the people. When almost no media anymore question those barely disguised coups against uncooperative standing governments, we're in very deep trouble. Because if we can't count on the media to tell us what is going on in far-off places, what may we expect of them closer to home?
Right.
We're witnessing a crisis for journalism that's nothing less than a crisis for democracy itself. Yet one more example of how this debilitating game is played was on display the other day in the New York Times, just one of many news organizations that have essentially acquiesced in the sophisticated Western power propaganda operation. The Times, whose reporting on Syria has been lackluster at best, finally provided us with a peek at what's actually going on, but the revelations were spun so as to benefit those seeking to depose Assad and bury the matter of foreign sponsorship in plain sight. The Times piece, under the headline, "CIA said to aid in steering arms to Syrian opposition," begins, "A small number of CIA officers are operating secretly in southern Turkey, helping allies decide which Syrian opposition fighters across the border will receive arms to fight the Syrian government, according to American officials and Arab intelligence officers." I think that block was a quote from the Times. So Baker continues, "Let's stop and consider what's being said here. If the CIA is operating secretly, then what are American officials and Arab intelligence officers doing publicizing their efforts? Are these leakers courageous whistleblowers, risking a nice visit to the Bradley Manning Hall of Detention? Don't bet on it. The reason we're being told about this, in all likelihood, is that they want us to know. Why? Because this is, in spy jargon, a limited hangout that hides the real truth. By leaking potentially controversial material, they get ahead of the curve, and by framing it in the most benign possible way, they control any discussion. Read on, please. So again, a quote from the Times. The CIA officers have been in southern Turkey for several weeks, in part to help keep weapons out of the hands of fighters allied with al-Qaeda or other terrorist groups, said one senior American official. The Obama administration has said it is not providing arms to the rebels, but it has also acknowledged that Syria's neighbors would do so. End quote. So here's another soft spin. Covert American operatives are helping keep weapons out of the hands of terrorist groups. To be precise, they're keeping them out of the hands of terrorist groups who are opposed to American interests, while channeling them to terrorist groups more amenable to our policies in that region. The identity of these friendly opposition fighters is not stated, but they're presumably groups that the CIA approves of, perhaps because they were originally created or at least co-opted by these very same CIA people. Of course, the story of Western support for selected terrorist groups in the region is not encouraging. We can recall extensive CIA funding of anti-Soviet mujahideen who morphed into anti-American fighters, including the Taliban and al-Qaeda, after the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan ended in 1989. The Times then goes on to say that the U.S. is not providing arms, but that U.S. allies, particularly Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, are. What it neglects to mention is that the U.S. provides arms to these allies, and all but tells these countries what to do with those arms. The trick is that Washington uses the intermediaries in order for the U.S. to say that it is not involved in overthrowing the Assad regime. This is why the U.S. government can hypocritically chastise Russia for sending in helicopters to the beleaguered Assad government. Perhaps Russia should, Western style, simply look the other way, wink wink, while its own allies send in weapons. Unfortunately for Russia, it is increasingly isolated, and since the end of the Soviet bloc, it has nothing comparable to the Western alliance. All it can do is to provide direct aid to the regime and raise objections at the UN to those arming the opposition. The fact that the U.S. government, and notably a democratic administration, is waging war against another government through surrogates is a really, really big deal. Yet our media, almost all of it, left, right, and other, walks in lockstep with a shared dubious narrative of an essentially spontaneous uprising being crushed by a ruthless government, and of a West helping the people purely for humanitarian purposes. It turns out that the U.S. government really did learn a lesson from Vietnam, win those hearts and minds, but not in foreign jungles or in deserts. The real battle is right here at home. That's it.
Yes, that's a timely warning, I think, about what happens. What are the American intentions? What is the real agenda there in intervening in these wars? The story, of course, the narrative on the surface is that we're there to protect and to rescue people. But again and again, this is a matter of the camel getting its nose under the tent, and pretty soon it becomes a matter of American domination of the entire nation or region. And this is the way the subversion goes. So no one is protecting or defending the Assad regime, which certainly is brutal and murderous. But what will happen after it has been displaced? Will American operatives remain on the ground there, and then the uniformed military be called in to protect them? This has happened again and again. We send in people to fight a secret war, and then of course they have to defend themselves, and then a whole lot of shooting starts, and the whole scene is reenacted over and over again. So we've been warned. It's happened again and again, but again, our supposed benign intentions and motives are supposed to be our guide here, helping to protect those people, and again, which is admirable in itself, but we should try to think about the longer-term consequences of these interventions.
Yeah, and I'll just point out that you said that again and again, we have done this and it has never worked out, that we were just a benign force. in particular, well, look up any time that we've intervened in past history and see what actually did happen. Do a little bit of research on it, and especially look at Latin America and the way that we've intervened there, for humanitarian reasons, and what we ended up doing and what the repercussions were. And usually the repercussions are a different dictator, just one that's more friendly toward U.S. policies. And so and I have a lot of really good people come up to me and say, but the United States should help out, should help be the humanitarian help. And they don't, either they have not read the history or they're not aware of what's really going on. They're not doing the research to find out what actually does happen when the U.S. does intervene, and especially when we intervene with arms. And we give arms to a lot of countries, and we provide military support in other ways, funding too, to lots of really nasty countries, but only because they're friendly to what the United States wants in the way of trade.
Story in the Washington Post, June 13th. Burkina Faso, the U.S. military is expanding its secret intelligence operations across Africa, establishing a network of small air bases to spy on terrorist hideouts from the fringes of the Sahara to jungle terrain along the equator, according to documents and people involved in the project. At the heart of the surveillance operations are small, unarmed turboprop aircraft disguised as private planes, equipped with hidden sensors that can record full-motion video, track infrared heat patterns, and vacuum up radio and telephone signals. The planes refuel on isolated airstrips favored by African bush pilots, extending their effective flight range by thousands of miles. About a dozen air bases have been established in Africa since 2007, according to a former senior U.S. commander involved in setting up the network. Most are small operations run out of secluded hangars at African military bases or civilian airports. So this story goes on to talk about how the surveillance operations are being conducted in Africa, all across North Africa, north of the equator. And I refer you to it if you'd like to know more about it. Again, the Washington Post article by Craig Whitlock, published on June 13th of this year. The next step is the debate about what our future wars in Africa and the Middle East will look like. And an interesting article by one Kimberly Dozier in Associated Press, Drones and computers are the new weapons of U.S. shadow wars. So there will not be boots on the ground. There will be dominance achieved by the use of drones in striking at key people and targets all across the area. This says that after a decade of costly conflict in Iraq and Afghanistan, the American way of war is evolving toward less brawn and more guile. That means deception, attempted deception of you and me. Drone aircraft spy on and attack terrorists with no pilot in harm's way. Small teams of special operations troops quietly train and advise foreign forces. Viruses sent from computers to foreign networks. Strike silently with no American fingerprint. The war is in the shadows, with the U.S. public largely in the dark. In Pakistan, armed drones, not U.S. ground troops or B-52 bombers, are hunting down al-Qaeda terrorists, and a CIA-run of Osama bin Laden's hideout was executed by a stealthy team of Navy SEALs. So that's the way it's evolving. And again, the magic word here is secret. And of course, what's going on is no secret from the people being targeted, as usual. There's the more overt war still going on after a decade or more in Afghanistan. Increasing violence in Iraq now, after the word was that it had been subdued and pacified. But it's another false dawn there, I'm afraid, of American control. So, latest word, 3 British soldiers killed by Afghan officer. More and more uniformed people in the Afghan police and military units are shooting and killing the NATO forces there. Afghan forces, soldiers and police officers have attacked their American and allied counterparts with increasing frequency in recent years. The assaults, once rare, have become common enough that they're widely referred to here in shorthand as green-on-blue attacks. Afghan police officers or soldiers have killed 26 coalition members this year, that is in the first half of 2012, compared with 35 in all of 2011. So this is another form of covert war that's going on there. The Afghans and others, again, showing that they want us out. Just get out is their message. And we will deal with our own problems.
Can we talk about?
Please do.
This is in relation to that. A lot of times, well, we still have peace demonstrations or anti-war demonstrations, and people say, "Well, what wars are you talking about? Because the wars are over." Yeah. And so, one of the things that I was going to propose is that we take a look at the number of troops that were in Iraq and Afghanistan before 9/11, the 9/11 attacks, and use that as a comparison to what is currently there. And not that we'll ever get down to that level again, but I think that would be a valid way of actually comparing. Are the wars still going on? Do we still have a lot of troops there, more troops than pre-war times? And so I leave it to you to look up the numbers, but what I want you to take into account is that before 9/11 attacks, the United States had deployed about 26,000 troops in the Central Command region. And the Central Command region is around Iraq and Afghanistan, not just in Iraq and Afghanistan, but the areas around, and I'll mention those in a second. So it's important. So in December of 2011, we still had 102,300, and so it's important it is important to count not just the in-country, but the theater-wide support. The Department of Defense gives a report of boots-on-the-ground figures, and that's actually the name of the report sometimes is Boots on the Ground, which only reports the personnel in Afghanistan or in Iraq. But the location reports, which I'm encouraging you to actually look into, also count all military personnel providing support in the neighboring countries, also all the ships in the area, and the counter-terror operations in the Philippines, which is also related to the wars in the Central Command area. You definitely need to add in the number of troops in Turkey, Iraq, Sudan, Israel, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Yemen, Djibouti, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Oman, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Pakistan, Ethiopia, Kenya, and the ships afloat. And remember also to add in the Philippines and count the number of drones, which is not reported unless there's a strike that's actually made, or if there's a mistake that's made that hurts a whole bunch of other people. And you should also consider how many NATO troops are still there, because even though the U.S. takes their troops out, we still are responsible for the NATO troops being there. So if you think that the wars are over, then you need to take count of this. And one of the really good sources for this is the Defense Manpower Data Center reports. And but you need to do the addition yourself to get all the number of troops and support people that are in the area. And don't forget the ships, because the ships are a major threat that's the way that we are continuing to tell Iran that we are in the area. And so those are important things to look up. So anytime you read a newspaper report that says that the boots on the ground has decreased, look into the real numbers.
Well, related point about the cost of the wars, in addition to all the lives lost, the figures that you usually see for how many millions and billions the wars are costing us each day, amounting to a couple of trillion overall, it's claimed. What's not typically reported is that these are only Pentagon figures, and other sources say that about half, very close to half, of federal spending is on war and war-related activities, so support of the military, operations past, present, and future. So again, the expenditures by other departments, the State Department, CIA, FBI, many other places where you would not expect it, the Veterans Administration,
Right.
and so on. Once you count in all of those, the true cost of these wars just burgeons, explodes beyond most people's reckoning entirely. And again, we're not being told the truth about the actual expense of these wars. This is Aware on the Air, recorded July 3rd, 2012. It's the Say the Magic Word edition.
War.
And the magic word, I guess, today is propaganda, in addition to war and taxes. And my concern with the extent to which imperialistic and militaristic assumptions have permeated our thinking for the last decade or generation or more. And with that, I'd like to turn to our friend David Harley, who may have a related comment. David?
Well, I have a letter from a friend in the Tea Party, and it relates to more local matters. He writes, "Dear friend, at this time I am forced to agree with you. The actions of the state government this past spring were a great disappointment. In particular, their treatment of the state pension program was a betrayal of the public interest. The claim that workers had paid into the system and they had a promise from the state as part of their contract is quite beyond the point. Creating such a high degree of employee security is not in the state's interest nor the employees. It discourages productivity. It sets a poor example for workers in the private sector. They too may claim such outrageous rights. How, I ask you, can we guarantee the security of the truly productive class, the job creators, men such as Bob Diamond, who has been so inventive in creating new wealth? If common employees are allowed to exploit the system so egregiously, no, it is time to stand firm. In this grave time, it is incumbent upon all right-thinking men to stand up and be counted. I insist upon 3 principles. Firstly, we must oppose all new taxes. Secondly, no increased taxes. And lastly, no new taxes. With a $14 billion imbalance in the state budget, we must take action. There is only one course open to us: cut every frivolous expenditure. For anyone familiar with our situation, it is evident that the greatest cost to our state is public education. We have thousands of overpaid teachers living off the state. When one includes the cost of maintaining the state universities, the cost is staggering. With one stroke, we could maintain we could set things right. I know that my critics will say that the total expenditure on education is only $7 billion, but they are wrong. I don't care what they say the facts are, they are wrong. But attractive as this solution may seem, there are attendant dangers. We would set millions of vicious teenagers loose on the streets. Chaos should reign. One shudders to think of this. But there is an alternative. We can look to the Roman history. In the late Roman Empire, citizens inherited their occupation. The rule was set in stone, unalterable. What I propose is that we implement such a rule for all teachers and professors in public institutions, indeed for all public employees. I should like to simply no longer pay these freeloaders, let them beg on the streets, but in the interest of humane treatment, I suppose that they should be thrown a few crusts now and then. This proposal would solve all our problems. It would keep dangerous creatures off the street. It would prevent the formation of a class of dangerous dissidents troubling the civic peace, and would balance the state budget. Perhaps we should even be able to cut taxes. Indeed, it could even prove a model for the federal government. Yours sincerely, T. Earl Grayfellow. And that is his comment for this week. He promises me a letter next week explaining how he will end the illegal immigrant problem and unemployment. I look forward to seeing that.
Very good. This reminds me of Jonathan Swift's modest proposal for the excess of Irish babies.
If you
very
think it,
interesting.
if you,
food source.
Yeah,
right, eat them. If you think education is expensive, try ignorance.
Yeah.
Is my.
So I'd like to know who Bob Diamond is. Is this the
Yeah.
Barclays?
Yes,
Barclays
that is
president who was just
precisely
forced
that.
to resign for having the people under him falsifying the interest rate that his bank was reporting they were.
That is precisely the Bob Diamond, representative of that class of such productive individuals as American bankers who invented the hedge fund.
There you go.
So,
Yeah.
well, I thank you.
Well, we could incarcerate them. It's much more expensive to put them in little cells and have people feed them every day than it is to provide school food,
Yeah.
lunches.
Yeah.
Jail those dangerously dissident teenagers.
That's
Well,
right,
we
dangerously
already
dissident.
have a situation where
It was-
there are people who are committing minor crimes in order to be taken to jail so
yeah.
that they will have medical services and so
Yeah,
on.
because
They will get something to eat, and how much of that is going on is an unknown, a disputed question probably, but I've heard reports of this again and again. And the classic way of doing it, of course, was to join the Army, but short of that, you just commit some minor crime and you can go to prison, especially in the winter when the danger of freezing is so great.
Where's O.
And,
Henry when we need him?
Yeah.
Sorry.
And it's happening. But anyway, let me describe now the list before me of shows on this station coming up this week. On Urbana Public Television, weekdays, 7 a.m., Democracy Now!, The War and Peace Report with Amy Goodman, followed by The Big Picture with Tom Hartman most days, and at noon, The David Packman Show, all of which are interesting. I find the first two, especially Amy Goodman and Tom Hartman, fascinating most days, and they, again, consider matters that you will not find elsewhere in the corporate media. Monday and Friday, 2 to 5 p.m., Tom Hartman conducts a live call-in show, the Tom Hartman program, and I think I can recommend that to you also. On tomorrow, Wednesday, July 4th, this show will again be broadcast at 11 o'clock p.m. We're on the air again. On Thursday the 5th at 1 o'clock, the Populist Dialogues, a show that I've not seen, but has an interesting title anyway. Friday the 6th, 1 o'clock, Labor's Worldview with two of our friends talking about labor issues and matters. At 7 o'clock, The World Tomorrow with the Julian Assange show, which is replacing News from Neptune for several weeks while the usual host is out of town. So again, Friday, 7 o'clock, The World Tomorrow in the usual spot for News from Neptune. On Saturday the 7th at 2 o'clock, The World Tomorrow, again, the Julian Assange show, which is based on a series of interviews that he conducted while he was under house arrest, I believe, in England. And he is still currently, apparently, resisting being sent to
Sweden.
to Sweden to be questioned there. He's never really been charged with anything yet. So, but he has been extradited there, and the question is, how far will he go in resisting that, and can he stay in the Ecuadorian
in the embassy.
embassy there indefinitely? Yeah.
Right.
And then at 7:30 p.m. Saturday, the New Arab Debates, Violence in Tunisia. Have either of you seen that?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
Okay. Well, that sounds very interesting,
Yeah.
indeed.
Is the
Okay, back to you, Karen.
Does Neil Parthen have his show on the new sports?
Not Another Sports Show?
Yeah, Not Another Sports Show.
I don't know about that.
I heard he was going to be on, but I haven't.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the
Oh,
schedule. Yeah.
I knew he was on
Definitely.
WRFU.
Yeah, but
so
I
he's
thi-
been on UPTV also?
Yeah, I heard that he was moving
Wow.
to here. So
Cool.
Yeah.
is he not? Did you have something else to read?
We have a note.
Oh, cool. Thanks. Oh, Wednesday at 6. There we go.
Yeah.
Late breaking news.
Yeah, right.
Not Another Sports Show.
Right.
Wednesday at
Thanks for
6.
All right, this just in. Right.
He's awesome.
Yeah. Okay. Some other straws in the wind here that I'd like for people to know about. Again, on the theme to which, the extent to which we have been militarized and what's happening there. I mentioned last week that there, or the week before, there is a shooting range now near Las Vegas where you can go out and shoot a machine gun. You can cut down paper cutouts. There's another one in Israel now, in the West Bank. So you can go there, and if you pay them a certain amount of money, you can have a live bucking machine gun in your hands and cut down paper cutouts, targets that look a whole lot like Palestinians, as it turns out. In Minnesota now, you can go there to drive a tank. This was on the radio recently. And there's a report here saying, what better way to release a little frustration than by driving a war tank over a car? For those looking to let out their inner Rambo, you might want to head to Minnesota. Drive a tank in Kasota, Minnesota gives customers the opportunity to drive old Cold War tanks around a 20-acre wooded course and shoot historic military machine guns. And for an additional fee, drivers can crush a car or even drive through a trailer home. So one guy, after his drive, said, "It was awesome. I mean, controlling that machine, it's incredible." Jacob Ostling told the Associated Press. Drive a Tank opened 3 years ago after owner Terry Borgum saw a similar experience in England. He now has almost a dozen tanks and is currently the only attraction still operating that offers this opportunity. He doesn't have American tanks, by the way. He didn't buy them at Army surplus, but he has British tanks from the Cold War era. And he says it's the only place in the world where you can drive tanks and shoot machine guns that isn't owned by the government. So you can drive it around with the hatch open, or for more with the hatch closed, and machine gun various targets and so on. He insists that they are safe. And,
Yeah, because nobody's shooting at you.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
And so far there have been no accidents, he says, so it's not a problem. So if you like to shoot machine guns or drive a tank around and crush cars, that's the place where you can go and pay to do that.
Z was actually advertising that people could sign up for training, paramilitary
Yeah.
training to go up there.
Yeah.
And you don't need to be with an organization. You could just go as an individual and get training. And that's right here in Illinois. There you go.
Yeah. Okay, back to the theme of the media. A reporter named Dan Frubkin has written about, in HuffPost, about how misinformed are various groups, the Republicans in particular, about world affairs. If presumptive GOP presidential nominee Mitt Romney's assertion that Russia is without question our number one geopolitical foe is any indication, then the answer would appear to be very misinformed. A new poll supports this theory. The poll, constructed by Dartmouth government professor Benjamin Valentino and conducted by YouGov in April and May, found that 63% of Republican respondents still believed that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction when the U.S. invaded in 2003. By contrast, 27% of independents and 15% of Democrats shared that view. The Bush administration's insistence that the Iraqi government had weapons of mass destruction and might give them to terrorists was a key selling point in its campaign to take the country to war. It turned out to be untrue, and there's more along these lines here. There's no reality-based argument that Iraq actually had WMDs. After extensive searches, found none, but this is hardly the first time many Americans have been certain of something that simply wasn't true. So what do we do about these so-called low information voters?
Yeah.
Karen?
Well, we tend to leave our weapons once we leave a country too, and I mean, like the tanks that you're talking about that are now like an amusement park ride type thing. We tend to leave a lot of guns and ammunition, and
Yes.
even while we're there, they end up in the hands of the exact people that we're supposed to be fighting against, or
Yeah.
say that we're fighting against. So we end up giving more weapons of mass destruction to the terrorists than Iraq ever could have, even if they had ever wanted to, even if
Well,
they had them to start with. Yeah.
Yeah, clarification point there. What we ordinarily mean by weapons of mass destruction, WMDs, are atomic, chemical, and biological weapons, and not just
I maintain that
bombs and guns.
we use chemical weapons,
Yeah, well,
and that
That's a
we
matter of
also give them
interpretation,
into
right.
the hands of.
yeah, yeah,
I've done research
Yeah.
here at the university.
yeah.
In that
According to this
area.
poll, an even larger proportion of Republican respondents who said Iraq had WMD, 64%, said they have either always believed or has come to believe that Barack Obama was born in another country, which he was not. Overall, the poll found the Republicans to be considerably more militaristic in their worldview than Democrats and independents. So part of the problem here, I think, is Fox News. And the consistent finding among media researchers is that the more people watch Fox News, the more misinformed and ignorant they become about what's happening in the world. It's a remarkable correlation,
It
which has stood up
decreases.
through a number of investigations. Did either of you ever watch Fox News?
I don't have a television.
Yeah.
Yeah, only in airports. Here sometimes.
Right.
Because it's on there.
Okay. Our friend Bob Naiman, who has occasionally been on this program, wrote to the local newspaper in May saying, that President Obama should follow the French leader's move. The newly elected president of France, Francois Hollande, has said that he will withdraw most or all of French troops from the Middle East by the end of the year. And Bob asks, why can't we do the same? Here's what we're slated to spend in Afghanistan this year, $88.5 billion, which is more important, making sure 46 million Americans have enough food, which would be supplied by the food stamps, which are now being withdrawn, by the way, serving 46 million Americans, which are projected to reach a cost of $80 billion. So what is more important, feeding the 46 million Americans or keeping the Afghan war policy on autopilot? The majority of Americans, including the majority of Republicans, want U.S. troops to come home from Afghanistan soon, not in 2014. Hollande's pledge is a chance for change. Americans agree that our troops should come out. Wouldn't it be better to withdraw all our troops faster together than have other countries withdraw sooner and leave our troops in Afghanistan alone? This is underlined by the recent killings that I mentioned of British troops in Afghanistan by an officer or someone in an officer's uniform in Afghanistan. And the whole thing has become a stinking mess. But to me, it means we can't get out of there soon enough. But anyway.
And the number of suicides that are still going on
Yeah.
in service and
Yes,
and upon
dramatic
return,
increase
too.
in the number of suicides there. While the government is approving more and more money for the Pentagon. Headline in the local paper in May, House gives nod to $642 billion defense budget. The approval broke the deficit-cutting deal they had with Obama. Having agreed to this, they decided that later that it wasn't enough, and so there's going to be more military spending. Ignoring a White House veto threat, the Republican-controlled House approved a $642 billion defense budget that breaks a deficit-cutting deal with President Obama and restricts his authority in an election year challenge to the Democratic commander-in-chief. The House voted 299 to 120 for the fiscal 2013 spending blueprint that authorizes money for weapons, aircraft, ships, and the war in Afghanistan, $8 billion more than Obama and the congressional Republicans agreed to last summer in the clamor for fiscal austerity. So that was only austerity in spending for human needs. It was apparently not meant to be austerity in spending for war weapons. And there it is. Mr. Romney insists that he will spend more and more on the military. Karen?
In your opening remarks, you had mentioned you were going to talk about what is a tax.
Yes.
Did you want to mention?
Well, the debate going on now, since the Supreme Court ruled on the Affordable Care Act, or sometimes called Obamacare by those who oppose it, there will be a charge or a tax increase, actually, for those who can't afford health insurance but choose not to buy it. The rationale being that this will give them an incentive to pay for their own health insurance rather than simply going to the emergency room or otherwise depending on the charity of other people, shifting the cost to them. But the question then arises, because this was justified by at least the Chief Justice on the basis of the taxing power of the federal government, it was called a tax. And the curious thing about all of this is that both Romney and Obama have insisted all along that this thing, because it was in Romney Care in Massachusetts, is not a tax. It's only a penalty or a fee or an assessment or whatever you want to call it. So the magic word here is tax, and when is something a tax and when is it not a tax? So I invite your comments on that. If you go to a federal national park and you pay to get in there and to use the facilities, is that a tax? Or an Illinois state park?
Right.
Well, one advantage of considering it a tax, even though Obama and company don't want to do it that way, is that then you can ask the question of whether the cost of the tax are being fairly spread across the population.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
So as the insurance system stands now, people with very low incomes are exempt. They're covered without having to explicitly pay for insurance.
Right.
But for a lot of the population, I think it's something like, well, I'm not sure, so I won't quote the figure. But for a lot of the population, people just have to buy insurance at whatever the market rate comes out to be, and that weighs much more heavily on moderate income people than it does on high income people.
Right.
But a fair apportionment of providing health care equitably across the population would actually make it a tax that was based on income or wealth or something of the sort, so that high income people would pay substantially more and everyone could be covered. If we consider health care to be a right of people just for existing, as we already do for people over 65 in the Medicare system, which seems to be a pretty popular program.
Yeah.
If we can do that, and we apportion its costs across the population as part of the general taxing system, why can't we do it for the entire population and not just the old population?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The only way of doing this rationally is to have some kind of insurance program, and to charge for this the same amount, a uniform amount for everyone in the same category. And what we can't allow is for people to opt out of it and then back into it when they have a medical problem or something goes wrong. And what we have now, or what's coming under the Affordable Care Act, may lead to that, some are saying. But it's a terrible problem. We have a vast confusion and ambiguity in this country about what is a public good, what is a private good, what does individualism mean, is there a common good, what does it require of us, is there a general welfare, and so on. And there are some people who take the extreme position that they should not have to pay for the schools and roads and police and fire services and so on, that will only be used by other people. They should only pay for the things that they personally use, which is a completely untenable position. But there are a lot of people who seem to have that belief. So
And I'm going to bring
should I
in-
have to pay for roads that I never use?
Right. I never have driven in Hawaii.
Yeah,
so does
right,
that
right.
mean I should
Yeah.
pay for the roads
Yeah.
in Hawaii and
Yeah,
Alaska?
right,
The other thing that I'm going to bring in with the health insurance in particular is that the industry that is benefiting from all of this is not the people who are actually providing the service, but it's also the insurance companies themselves. It's still private industry that is private insurance industry that is benefiting from the tax, what
Yes,
they're calling
yes.
the tax. And I still have a problem with that.
Yes.
More than I have a problem with the idea that someone might opt in and opt out.
Yeah.
And I also have no problem with us paying, well, in most other countries, European countries in particular, and, even most South American countries, healthcare is a human right.
Yes.
And, if your neighbor is sick, you want that person to be taken care of so that you don't get sick. And
Yeah.
it's a way of controlling disease as well. And it is a public good. Not only a human right, but a public good.
Yeah.
And but the fact that an insurance agency is benefiting from from our situation
Yeah.
is kind of creepy to me.
Yes, well, that's an unfortunate aspect of this. So, yeah.
If it went to the doctors, that would
yeah.
be fine.
The ACA is gravely defective, but some think it can be justified, and I agree as a first step towards something much better, which would be a single-payer system. With
Yeah.
that, we have to close down. Let me remind you that this is Aware on the Air for July 3rd, 2012. You may see this banner again in the parade tomorrow afternoon locally. We will be at the so-called farmers market, the market in the square, Saturday morning. So look for our table there, and we'd be glad to talk to you and discuss some of these matters.
And a peace
with you
demonstration
then.
2 to 4.
Yes.
On the 7th.
Yes, Saturday afternoon, also from 2 to 4. Some of us will be
In the
where
sun
is it this
again.
time? Yeah.
Downtown Champaign.
Downtown Champaign, carrying our signs and trying to persuade you to work with us in this effort to end these destructive wars
Immoral.
and to bring more peace and sanity to this community and to the world. We meet Sundays at 5 o'clock at the McKinley Foundation, 5th and Daniel in Champaign. Meetings are at a kind of low ebb now because so many people are out of town and doing other things, but you're always welcome to come and discuss these things with us, find out what we're doing. So 5th and Daniel in Champaign, Sunday at 5 if you'd like to come to our meetings. And with that, I think we have to close down. I want to thank David, who's left, and Stuart and Karen for joining me today. And
Thank you,
I'll
Ron.
be stumbling through this again, I guess, next week in Carl's absence, and we'll have a new set of issues for you to think about at that time. And so with that, good night and good luck to you all.